The rain came down in sheets that December night in Modesto, California, a gray curtain that blurred the Christmas lights strung across quiet suburban streets. The storm rolled in just before midnight, washing the sidewalks with a cold, relentless hiss. It was the kind of night where even the neighborhood dogs fell silent. Laci Peterson, 8 months pregnant and full of plans for the coming new year, had vanished into that darkness. By morning of December 24, 2002, the silence had turned to panic. Her husband, Scott Peterson, told police he had left home early to go fishing at the Berkeley Marina, a drive of nearly 90 miles. He said Laci planned to take their golden retriever, Mackenzie, for a morning walk and then bake cookies for a family gathering. But by 10:18 a.m., a neighbor found Mackenzie wandering the street with his leash still attached, tail damp from the rain. Laci's mother, Sharon Rocha, grew uneasy when calls to her daughter went unanswered. By that afternoon, when Scott returned home to find his wife gone, the storm outside seemed to echo the dread settling over the family. Investigators arrived to a house where Christmas presents sat unopened beneath a tree, and a half-finished breakfast lay on the kitchen counter. Nothing inside suggested forced entry or a struggle. Friends and family began to search the neighborhood in the driving rain, calling Laci's name into the wind. Police quickly noted the details of Scott's morning. A sudden fishing trip, alone, on Christmas Eve. He said he had left before dawn, towing his small aluminum boat to the marina, though no one recalled him mentioning such plans before. Detectives quietly took note of every inconsistency. The search grew massive. Volunteers combed parks and canals. Flyers with Laci's smiling face covered telephone poles and shop windows. Candlelight vigils burned through the winter nights. But suspicion, like the storm clouds, kept gathering over Scott. Neighbors described his calm as unnervingly detached. While thousands of strangers scoured fields and waterways for Laci, Scott seemed oddly composed, at times even smiling for cameras. Detectives watched closely as tips from across the state poured in. Within weeks, a woman named Frey came forward to the Modesto police with a stunning revelation. She had been dating Scott, who told her he was single, and, chillingly, said he had lost his wife only after Laci disappeared. Amber agreed to record her phone conversations with Scott. On those tapes, his voice was soft, even charming, but the words betrayed him. Lies about his whereabouts, stories of being in Europe while attending Laci's candlelight vigil. For investigators, the recordings were a crack in the facade. The evidence began to align like a puzzle. Scott's alibi, the fishing trip, suddenly seemed less innocent when detectives learned he had recently purchased a new boat and 2 large umbrellas from a hardware store. They discovered he had researched tides in the San Francisco Bay, and there were traces of cement on his warehouse floor where he kept the boat. Police suspected he had made homemade anchors, yet the bay yielded no sign of Laci. For months, winter storms and cold currents kept their secret. Then April came, and with it a ghastly discovery. A couple walking along the San Francisco Bay shoreline found the remains of a baby, later confirmed to be Laci's unborn son, Connor. The next day, a second body, badly decomposed, head and limbs missing, washed ashore nearby. DNA testing confirmed the nightmare. It was Laci Peterson. The discovery shattered any lingering hope and tightened the net around Scott. Within days, police tracked him to a golf course in La Jolla. Far from home, his hair dyed blonde, his car stuffed with camping gear, nearly $15,000 in cash, and multiple cell phones. He claimed he was visiting family, but the image of flight was impossible to ignore. He was arrested on April 18, 2003, charged with the murders of his wife and unborn son. The trial, beginning in June 2004, unfolded like a grim theater. Prosecutors painted a portrait of a man who wanted freedom from marriage and impending fatherhood. They presented Amber Frey's recorded calls to the jury, each word a needle of deception. They showed the purchase receipts for the boat and the umbrellas, the traces of cement dust, the title charts. They argued that Scott lured Laci to the marina or killed her at home, transported her body in his boat and cast her into the bay weighted with homemade anchors. Though no one could say exactly how Laci died, the circumstantial evidence stacked higher with each witness. Defense attorneys countered that the case was built on speculation. They pointed to a burglary across the street from the Peterson home that Christmas Eve, suggesting intruders might have taken Laci. They highlighted the lack of direct physical evidence. No blood, no eyewitness, no murder weapon. But the jury listened as prosecutors replayed Scott S. taped calls to Amber, his calm voice describing a European trip while he stood amid the candlelight vigil for his missing wife. To the jurors, it sounded less like grief than calculated deceit. In the courtroom, Sharon Rocha and Laci's stepfather, Ron Gransky, sat through every revelation, their faces etched with quiet anguish. Amber Frey testified in a steady voice, detailing how Scott had charmed her with talk of a future together. The photographs of the recovered bodies were never shown publicly, but whispers of their condition haunted the proceedings. Outside, the media swarmed, turning the Modesto tragedy into a national obsession. After 5 months of testimony and 7 days of deliberation, the jury returned its verdict on November 12, 2004, guilty of first-degree murder for Laci and guilty of second-degree murder for Connor. Scott showed little emotion as the words fell like stones in the hushed courtroom. During the penalty phase, jurors heard emotional testimony from Laci's family about the loss of a daughter and a grandson who would never take his first breath. On December 13th, they recommended death. Judge Alfred DeLucchi formally sentenced Scott Peterson to die by lethal injection. The years that followed brought appeals and legal maneuvers, debates about juror misconduct, and questions about the death penalty itself. In 2020, the California Supreme Court overturned his death sentence citing errors in jury selection, but upheld his conviction. In 2021, he was resentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The storm that began that Christmas Eve had long passed, but the shadow of what happened never lifted from Modesto, or from the families who endured it. Even now, more than 2 decades later, the image lingers. Rain streaking across darkened windows, a golden retriever standing alone on the sidewalk, leash trailing in the wet street. The house behind him glows with soft holiday lights, but inside, silence reigns. Somewhere out on the bay, the tide rises and falls over secrets that only the cold water ever fully knew.